ready to pick back up. I don't know who was in charge of the lunch, but that was good, wasn't it? Yeah. Nice. Thank you, whoever. Thank you for all that. Okay, so we're going to pick it up again, and you can see it's going to be the shepherds and the wise guys. My mother tells the story that when I was little, I went to visited Grandma, and we went to Grandma's church, and I guess they put me in a Sunday school class, and church was not really part of my deal my family's deal at that point. But when we went home, we went to Grandma's house and went to Grandma's church, and so they asked me what I learned in Sunday school, and I said, well, I learned about the wise guys, and it was Christmas, of course, and they said, no, Gary, it's the wise men. No, they said the wise guys. I know they did. So I've never forgotten my wise guys. So we're going to talk about both of them and the importance of them in the story for a variety of reasons. This is some perspective that I have, and you may not have that, or others may not. Not quite as controversial as my Christmas manger and all that stuff, but nonetheless, some insights. What's the point? It's some insights in the Bible. As an archaeologist, I'm not trying to prove the Bible. First off, I don't think the Bible needs proving. The Bible can stand up on its own for itself. It is God's word. It doesn't return void, he said. And so you just put it out there and let God's word do its work in people's hearts and lives. And of course, try to be open, let it do its work in your own. So I'm not trying to prove anything, but what I love about the Bible, what I love about archaeology is it helps me to understand and appreciate the Bible better. It illuminates the Bible for me. I've got a tickle here, excuse me. Let me try this. So we're just going to illuminate the Bible and hopefully make some applications and give some biblical truth that'll be helpful to you. So the importance of the shepherds and the wise men. We'll start with the shepherds. So we did Luke 2, 1 through 7. That's the story of Jesus' birth, and we worked that one pretty good. So here's Luke chapter 2, beginning in verse 8. And I highlighted some of the key thoughts. So this is the shepherd story, and you're familiar with it. But I'll just point out the angel said that who you're going to meet is Christ the Lord. Of course, Christ is the Greek word that comes off the Hebrew word Mashiach for Messiah, anointed one. And so they're offering an insight that shepherds should have known something about. So this was Christ the Lord. And then this is a sign that he's going to be in cloths. And that was, the old King James was swaddling cloths or swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And swaddling cloth or clothes, it really wouldn't have been clothes. It wasn't clothes. Swaddling cloth was linen cloth that was wrapped around children's limbs to keep them warm, and it would be a little bit of protection and safety and protection. So that's really what that was about. So that would not have been unusual in their world. So when the angel said that, this would be something that they knew about. So it would be a newborn baby in Bethlehem that was like no baby ever born in Bethlehem, including King David himself. So this is the sign that the angel said. And of course, when they got there, it says right at the end of verse 16 that they saw the baby in the manger. So this manger thing was a big part of the story from the very beginning. When she gave birth, she laid him in a manger, and the angel said, watch for the manger. And then the shepherds got there and saw him in the manger. So that was not normal. Swaddling clothes, cloths, linen cloths around the limbs, that was normal. But lying in a manger was not. They would have had another kind of crib, something else, but not normally in a manger. So that's what they're going to be looking for. Now the shepherds were out in their fields. It says nearby in the fields at night, watching their flocks in the fields at night. So this is an old photograph of Bethlehem. Well, it's not Bethlehem, but the region around Bethlehem. This is the terraces coming down the southwest side, and Bethlehem is up off over here. And so this is the area that the shepherds would have known, whether they were in this spot or not. We don't know what spot, but this is the area that they would have known. But this was the territory, and you know, I have such romantic pictures in my mind of you know, these old stories. I love these old photographs. So this is a view. Here's a view now. We're looking back. We're looking. So we were looking at really sort of the hills over around this side. So now here we are, and this is late 1800s, and the main part of the city is up in this area, and this is the Beit Sahor area to the south, and today it's very close to the border between Palestine and Israel, the West Bank. Sorry, maybe it's a little political, but we have terms that we use today that are sort of a politically correct terms, and of course not in California. You don't have any of that, but this is only in the Middle East. So in the Middle East, I'm not trying to take sides here or be prejudiced. I think it's some things to think about, and then you can use your own terminology. In the West Bank, and first of all, that's a politically correct term. The Israelis refer to it as Judea and Samaria, and but the world, politically correct, calls it the West Bank, it's the term everybody uses, but maybe you don't want to use that term. And that would be Judea and Samaria is what the Israelis refer to it. And in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, if it's a Palestinian community, it's a village. Now it can be large and have massive skyscraper kind of buildings, but it's a village. And in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, if it's Jewish, it's a settlement. Doesn't matter if it's a settled village, a settled city for 50 years, it's a settlement. Now these are politically correct and I think a little bit politically charged terms. So I just try to use the word now for myself. Israeli, they're not Israeli settlements, they're Israeli communities. Communities in the, and sometimes I'll use. I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm not trying to be offensive to the Muslim and Arabic Palestinian people that I know and deal with and work with in Israel, in the West Bank. But I don't have to be controlled. I can think for myself and decide what terms I want to use when I want to use them. And I'm just throwing that out to you for whatever that's worth. So where was I? Oh, this was right on the border. So this area, so just behind me here in this picture, of course, I wasn't there to take this picture. This is an old picture. 71, but almost, and not yet. So this is very near the border. The Israelis have built some nice high-rise apartments. I got to visit with a man from one of those this last spring when we were there, and they're building right on the edge of the line. And then they've got the Palestinian side, which is where Bethlehem is today. And what was the most Christian town in Israel is not anymore. It's, I'll tell you a story. there's two young Muslim men in Bethlehem who have been, some Christian people shared the gospel with them about Jesus, and these Muslim boys responded in faith. And they're not the boys, they were young teenagers, and it's probably been about 4 or 5 years now. Now they're older teenagers, and they've just, when they are in this certain environment, which is a Christian environment in Bethlehem, they were very, very honest and open about their faith. And the word got out and around, and they are living under daily persecution and threats from their fellow countrymen, from their family members. And so I was sent an email and just asked to pray for them. And I honestly can't even exactly remember their names, but there's two young brothers in the Lord in Bethlehem that could use your prayers. And so if you're so disposed, you can tell God, Gary couldn't remember their names, but I'm pretty sure you know who they are, and he do. And you could just remember these two young men in prayer. So Bethlehem is not the city it once was, and I'm ashamed that the word I got was the Christian leader, real Christian leader of one of the institutions in Bethlehem said, you need to stop this preaching because you're going to hurt all of us. And that rankles me. I don't like that. And so I wish really we should pray for these young men. So this is right on the border of present-day Israel and present-day West Bank, Palestine. So next picture. So we're going to just back away a little bit now. This is modern. So we're looking at Bethlehem on the hill, and today now, this whole area. Bethlehem is a massive. It's not a village. It's a massive town. It's a big town, and I don't mind going there. I like to go there, but it's full of plenty of good people. But the politically charged environment just makes it complicated sometimes. So this is Bethlehem today. So we backed way off from there, and this is taken from near where the line is. Where I told you those new high rises that the Israelis have built are there. And this we just moved up closer. So this is the Beit Sahur Valley. Today there's a lot of olive trees, but in Bible days with these terraces, they would have had grown a lot of grain, a lot of wheat in this area. This was fertile, prime territory for growing crops. And they would grow, because they don't have the great big fields like you have here in California to grow whatever it is you grow. You grow rice here? My wife said, I remember rice. And she said, oh, there's a sign, rice company. So, so what else do you grow? Sunflowers? Tomatoes? Beef? Wheat. Okay. So a lot of wheat there. So anyway, this is that area. And so this would be the kind of area where the shepherds would have been with their flocks, because they were nearby Bethlehem, nearby guarding their flocks at night. And so they're nearby Bethlehem, and they've got their sheep out in these fields that at certain times of the year are full of grain. Now, I can't tell you exactly what and where and when, but that's what was around Bethlehem, because they needed it, of course, to survive, and maybe even did some trading with it. So with this in mind, here's our verse, Luke 2:8. And they were shepherding, and there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks by night. Now, I want to suggest some possibilities here. First off, that they were probably nearby. They were probably within the agricultural, the economic zone of Bethlehem, something like a 3-kilometer radius. So historically, around an ancient city or community, it wasn't even necessarily a walled city, but ancient communities, about 3-kilometer radius around the outside would be workable land for the people of that city to have, and that would be where they'll grow their grain. Who in the Old Testament do we remember growing some grain in the economic zone outside of Bethlehem in the Old Testament? Boaz. And then a young lady named Ruth got hooked up in his fields, and the rest is history. So this agricultural zone, and we would be, well, that last picture, we'd be in that agricultural zone. And that agricultural zone would have been overwhelmingly fields, and this is good stuff, so you'd be growing wheat as opposed to barley. You grow barley when you can't grow wheat very well. Barley you can live with, you certainly feed it to the animals. You can make barley bread. It's not that good compared to wheat bread, but you could survive and you get the calories you would want to have to keep going every day. But this would be good land, growing wheat crops. I'm sure there were some olive trees around, but it would have been prime fields with the terracing to grow grain. So it's within Bethlehem's agricultural economic zone. And it was the perfect region for the town's grain fields. So I'm talking about the area we were looking at was the prime. And I'm not saying that's where the shepherds were. It would have been in that general region, but I'm going to suggest why this might have been where the shepherds were. So it's the best growing around the Bethlehem, that particular area, southeast Beit Sahur Valley. Now the sheep would only be allowed to graze in these fields after harvest and before planting. If this was the prime economic zone for Bethlehem, they had to have these grain fields. Are they going to allow the sheep in the grain fields while the grain is growing? Absolutely not. No way. And if shepherds wandered in there, somebody would be chasing them out, because this is our economic lifeblood. This is how we're going to survive the next 12 months. So watching our grain fields are very, very important. So they're nearby Bethlehem, and they've got their sheep in the fields, and they're staying out at night. Planting, growing, and harvesting periods, the sheep would not be allowed in the fields when they're growing, but when that's going on, they would go to the Judean desert. Now, the time of the year that you're plowing, you're planting, and you're growing, what time of the year would that be in the Holy Land? It would be beginning in October, in through to March, because that's called the rainy season in the Holy Land. You remember in the Bible, the former rains and the latter rains? The former rains start in October, and they're not always super hard, but they get started. And when the former rains come, it softens up the ground because it hasn't rained for about 8 months. And it's just as hard as a rock. And so the ground softens up, and you can plow some rows, some furrows, so you can put your seed in. So once it starts raining, then that's planting time, and you're not letting any shepherds into your fields while you're planting. Well, the shepherds don't need to be in your fields while you're planting, because in the rainy season, what happens, those of you who've been there, what happens to the desert? It gets green grass. If it's raining, the desert gets, if you've been to the Holy Land and you've seen it in the summertime, and it's just barren. In fact, you see sheep up in the hills, and it looks like they're just eating dirt. They're not eating dirt. It's just dried up grass. It's still there, and that's what they're eating. So in the wintertime, when they can't be in the fields, they're just over the hill. They're right on the edge of the desert. They're right over the hill, and they're eating the grass that's growing now in the desert. And the Bible talks about the desert blossoming like a rose. It only does that for a few months in like December and January, during that time period. So that's when the shepherds are not around Bethlehem keeping watch over their flocks by night. When the harvest, the planting, the growing, the harvesting seasons go, they're over the hill in the desert where they can find enough food for the sheep to survive. Once they've finished the harvest and the grain's all been brought in, then the shepherds come back into the local fields. I'm going to suggest the shepherds would need permission to graze here. The local farmers and the shepherds had a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic, S-Y-N, sin means same or together. Biotic is from the Greek word bios, which is life. So they're living life together and usually in a mutually beneficial relationship. That's what symbiotic means. So that the shepherds and the farmers are cooperating with each other. If I don't let my sheep ruin your crops, after you have harvested your stuff, my sheep can go in and eat the stubble and poop on your fields. And you would appreciate that as a farmer. Now, I know you don't like it in your front yard, but when in your field, that works. So this totally fits the ancient world, the scene at Bethlehem in New Testament times. And then I suggest at the very bottom, the shepherds that were out all night in the fields would not have, almost for sure, not have been the owners. They would have been hired hands. You've heard it said, and I've said it, the shepherds were considered among the lowliest of society. Well, we don't actually have any historical evidence for that. We do know that was true 400 or 500 years AD. That was a reality, but we don't have any evidence that was true in New Testament times. So what I think I could say about what I'm going to suggest about these shepherds, they're probably local boys. They're probably not even David stayed out with his father's flocks. These are probably not the sons of the owners of the flocks. These are probably boys, young men, teenagers, hired out to watch the flocks at night. The owner's son's probably not going to have to do that. He may have to go check on them some, but he's probably not going to be the guy out all night. Could be, but probably not. And so these young men, these are probably young men who are out there. They're not the lowest of society. They're just working the jobs that you can't get much else. That's kind of what you got. But they're local boys, I'm going to suggest to you, working in conjunction with the farmers and their fields. And so if they are out in the fields at night, and by the way, at night in the hill country of Palestine, it can get quite chilly. What's the temperature today? It's chilly, isn't it? What's it like? Wet and chilly. This would be the rainy season in the Holy Land, wet and chilly, and that would not be a good time for the shepherds and the sheep to be out in the fields around Bethlehem. They would be, because of the farming situation, they would be over in the desert, going down the eastern side towards the Dead Sea, where it's warmer and where there's some green grass growing because of the rain. So the shepherds are probably not out guarding their flocks in the fields at night during what months of the year? October, November, December, January, February, that time. they're probably not going to be out there during those times. Now, does that ruin your Christmas? Here's a chart. The agricultural cycle of the Levant, and Levant is simply from a French word to rise. It's the place where the sun rises. That's the east. Anatolia is the same meaning Greek word to rise, and so that's the east. Anatolia, Turkey, was the eastern world to Europe, and the Levant is the eastern Mediterranean coastline, and that's the eastern world to Europe and to the rest of the Mediterranean world. So here's, let me just pull this up. So here we go, agricultural cycle. Here's our solar months. This is the Hebrew lunar months. Here's the feasts and festivals of Israel. You're familiar with those. Here's the time of the rainy season, and then the time of the dry season. And rainfall, there's the early rains, the former rains, and then the hard winter rains. That's really December, January. And then the latter rains that may or may not come and may be strong or not. And then absolute drought. Plowing is going to happen with the earlier rains, planting in the winter rains, harvesting towards the end of the latter rains. And of course, this is when the wheat, barley, harvest barley, both of those were in the book of Ruth. She started in the harvest barley, the barley harvest, and worked all the way through the wheat harvest there. And then these are the summer fruits that would come as well. So it looks like, from what the Bible text suggests and what we know about the ancient world, that most likely the shepherds themselves were not reviled and hated. They were probably just the most unlikely people who were associated with Bethlehem that would get invited to a special event. Okay? They weren't reviled and hated and despised. Just, the last people you'd put on your list to come to something special. These are just a bunch of young guys, and they don't have any skills or knowledge to do anything else, so this is what we hire them to do. And they're the ones that stay out all night with the sheep in the fields. But they better not be in my fields after I've planted, and they better not be in there until I've harvested. As long as we have that going on, we're fine. So these would have been young men from the community, I'm suggesting, and not highest on the social totem pole, but not despised and hated just because they were shepherds. And they were probably doing their job efficiently, hopefully efficiently and effectively. And they were not around Bethlehem with their flocks during Christmas, at least the Christmas that we know. And so, as to why we have Christmas when we do, and there's reasons. I mean, there's thoughts, there's ideas why, how we got there, and we don't really know for sure. That we don't have any documentation about what anybody started saying and doing, and here's why they did it. We just know that became our tradition. And I don't think you need to hate Christmas and get rid of your nativity set and don't do a Christmas play. You don't need to do any of that. Go ahead and do it all. Have a great time. But just understand, first off, what we do today has very little, our Christmas celebrations have very little to do with biblical Christmas, right? Our Christmas trees and our Santa Clauses and all that stuff. That doesn't have anything much to do with real Christmas. So enjoy that. But as far as what the Bible says and is talking about, I think we can say with some certainty that in fact Christmas probably happened not in December, but probably happened June, July, August, or September. Sometime during that year, after the harvest and before the fall rains and planting. Okay, so that's the shepherds. Are you all right with that? Okay, let's just think about, you don't have to agree. Uh-oh, my battery's running low, and we thought we had it plugged in. Maybe it got unplugged here. we'll check. Okay, well, if it dies, we'll just stop early and have some more pizza. Is there any pizza left? It still says okay, put it back on there. And let me just step out of here a minute, and we'll see how we're doing. Okay, is it in? Yep, it says we're charging. So maybe I did something up here, pulled it loose or something. Okay, you don't get off that easy, folks, sorry. Come on. Do what you're supposed to do. Go back. Okay, somebody who's smarter than me, resume slideshow. Let's try that. Let's try it again. Sorry, people. Anybody want to say anything? Anybody want to sing?
So Christmas in July is not such a, when they advertise Christmas in July.
You're right. You're right. I've written fundraising letters for Christmas in July. You're right. Good call. Thank you for sharing. Okay, there we're back. Sorry. We'll go back to where we were. So, we've talked about the shepherds. Now let's talk about the wise guys. So they're in Matthew chapter 2. So we had reference to the birth in chapter 1, and then we have the post-birth stuff in chapter 2, and it centers on the wise men, and that goes to chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. There's a couple of things worth looking at in this section. So the wise men, it says they come from the east, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. For me, that's an important part of the story. They came from the east. I didn't highlight that. I should have. And they came to Jerusalem. So they came from the east to Jerusalem, and they ask, where is he that's born King of the Jews? Now, why did they go to Jerusalem? It's the capital of the Jewish state. So, if you're looking for him born King of the Jews, that's what you look for. And by the way, the word Jew, it gets its origin in Judea. So the people of Judea would be, now in fact, actually the word's used in the Old Testament a couple times, Jews. Okay, so they came from the east. They asked, where is he born King of the Jews? And of course, they were asking about the king in Jerusalem because they thought that the newborn king would be in Jerusalem. We saw his star. The star's associated with what? The star is associated with a king that's been born, and they came to worship. Now, I didn't do any kind of extensive study on this, but there's some interesting discussion on just exactly what they meant by worship, and it would seem that it's more than just paying some sort of homage to an important person. It takes it to a whole other level, and of course that would mean something to us. So when they came, they went and found King Herod. This is the present king. Where's he that's been born King of the Jews? And Herod says, I'll get back to you on that. And so he calls for his chief priests. And interesting, they're looking for the king, and he asked them about the Christ. So he had the sense that this potential king might be the one that we're talking about as the Christ or the Messiah. Now, Herod was I would use the word, I hope this doesn't come off offensive, but a half-breed Jew. He was an Idumean. In fact, he wasn't really Jewish at all. He was an Idumean whose family converted to Judaism, and he married a Jewish daughter of the Hasmonean, the Maccabee family, to ingratiate himself with the Jews, but he didn't get elected by the Jews. He got appointed by the Roman emperor. So they didn't really care much for him. Frankly, he didn't care much for them, except that what he could get out of them. And it was not a symbiotic relationship. So they asked for the king of the Jews. He asked the chief priests, where does it say in the law where the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one, will be born? And I don't know if they had to study or not. I hope they didn't have to. I think they instantly knew the answer. Somebody said, well, it's in Bethlehem of Judea, and they quoted Micah 5:2. Then Herod called, well, we won't read it all, but he says, y'all go, y'all find him, and then tell me, because I want to come and worship him too. And the Bible says that they went, and I should have marked it again. They saw the star, and they got there, and when they got there, they bowed down, and they worshiped him. And God bless them, they brought gifts of gold, incense, which is, frankincense is fine incense. That's what it means, fine incense, and myrrh. So now we're going to talk about the wise men. So let's start not what the Bible says, but what the tradition says about the wise men. There was one of them, his name was Caspar, and he was known to be the king of Tyre. And tradition says he brought the gift of myrrh. Tyre is located north, right on the seacoast. It was a Phoenician city. In fact, it was a city that God promised to the Israelites. All they had to do was take it, and they never got around to it. And so this is a Canaanite, at that point, Phoenician city. Well, by this time, even after the Phoenicians. But it's a Gentile city. Tyre, just north of, along the coastline, the Mediterranean coast. Then there was Melchior, who was the king of Arabia. So Caspar was from north. Melchior is from southeast, the Arabian Peninsula. And he brought the gift of gold. Then there's Balthazar, the king of Ethiopia, and that's southwest, and he brought the gift of of frankincense. Actually, I would have switched those two because a lot of the best frankincense comes from Arabia, South Arabia, and gold in the Amarna letters, if you're familiar with them from the late Bronze Age, the time of Moses and Joshua. The Amarna letters were sent from Canaan to the pharaohs in Egypt, and then some of the kings around the other countries, and they remarked to Pharaoh that they know gold is as dust in Egypt, because Egypt was going south to Nubia, and they were just taking all kinds of gold from Nubia, and had the Nubians under their authority, and they were giving all this gold up to Egypt. So Egypt was gold they had. They didn't have nearly as much silver. They didn't have a lot of other stuff, but they had gold. So I would have switched those two, but whoever put up that tradition didn't know that. So that's the tradition, right? The three wise guys, and each one brought a different gift. They come from a different area, all Gentiles, okay, non-Jews. So here's what Matthew 2 says about them. So that was the tradition. Here's what Matthew 2 says. Well, first off, they're not kings. The tradition is we three kings of Orient, the East, are. So they're not kings. They're magi. And magi would be understood as, of course, we get our modern English word magic from that. Now, not like Penn and Teller kind of magic, and not necessarily occultic magic. These are men who are educated, They are well respected. They would be men who were astrologers. They understood, they saw the stars and understood things about the stars, patterns from the stars, and they would be considered the scientists of their day. And they could see and understand things, or at least thought they did, and people believed they did, that others couldn't get. So they were highly respected people. Kings, all kings wanted wise men. And of course, if your wise man act won't go very well, you weren't going to be around long. But every king wanted and needed wise men. And as long as their stuff worked out okay, they did quite well. Educated, scientific, they had that sense more than most, literate, and well respected. They were not kings, they were wise men. In the Bible, there were not 3 men, there were just 3 gifts. And from the 3 gifts, we get the 3 wise men. So all we know is they brought gifts. We don't know how many there were. They probably came in a group, a caravan, and so it was probably not just 3. It would have been a larger group. Now, I don't know how many. I have no idea. But if they're going to travel for some distance, they're probably going to need to be a pretty good-sized group. And if they're not a big group, they're going to have to hire a bunch of people to go with them and run protection for them. So this is probably a pretty formidable force. It said earlier in Matthew 2, when all of Jerusalem was aroused and concerned when they showed up. So they made noise when they showed up. It was probably a lot more, a good bit more than 3. Their names, neither their names nor their nationalities are known. We note they're from the east, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. They are not at the manger when the baby. Remember with the shepherds we read that they saw the sign was a manger, a baby in a manger wrapped in swaddling clothes. And when they got there, they saw the baby in the manger. So they were there that night. These guys were not. Whoops. Okay, there we go. Now, I just thought you should know this. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh as of the 1st of December, 2022. Market price for gold was $1,781 an ounce. If you have some, I am happy for you. I do not. Wish you did. The online market price, this was online, market price for an ounce of frankincense, 1st of December, was $2.63 for an ounce of frankincense resin. Not much of a gift, huh? And myrrh was even worse. All right? So that's how much those 3 items would cost today. Would it surprise you to know, hopefully it won't, but gold, frankincense, and myrrh were as valuable or even more so valuable in New Testament times than gold. So you can go out and get a pound of frankincense for less than $40 today. You couldn't touch it in the ancient world. It was a guarded commodity that people who they have been known in the ancient world. They were known to strip search the workers in the field to make sure they had nothing when they left. The myrrh or frankincense resin, they're both tree saps from certain kind of trees, and it hardens and becomes this hardened object material, organic material that can be used in medicinal purposes. It can be used in perfume. It can be used as incense. Both of them can be used for incense. So it had great value. It was when those 3 guys brought those 3 gifts. They were saying oodles about Jesus. They were treating him as took quite a trip apparently, and brought these incredible gifts to Jesus this was an amazing thing. And I'll bet you these guys looked like they had money, and Herod probably could not wait to get his hands on this one way or t'other. And of course, you remember what the wise men did after they saw Jesus. They went home another way. They did not go back to Jerusalem, which would be the main road. You take Bethlehem north to Jerusalem, and you know Herod had his boys out. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Herod didn't have guys follow him down there, and I don't know what happened. But God had no intention of them to go back, and they didn't. So Herod did not find out what was going on. So this is just a little reminder. Who are they? They're Magi from the east, and we're going to talk about east in just a moment. They went to Jerusalem. Why? Because they're looking for, well, first of all, that's where the present king lives, but they're looking for one born king, and this, of course, is the one that they're discussing about him being the Christ. Where would the Christ be born? And the focus is on Bethlehem in chapter 2 of Matthew. And when, it says in 2:7, Herod called for the wise guys privately and asked them for the exact time of seeing the star. When did you first see the star? So they associated the star with the birth of a king of the Jews. That was their deal. He said, tell me exactly when that was. I don't know if they told him the truth or not. They could have smelled a rat probably pretty quick. And maybe they didn't give him the right information. Maybe they did. We don't know. All we know is, from that basis of that, at the end of chapter 2, he's gone to Bethlehem and killed every baby, male baby, from the age of 2, from 2 years old and younger. So they may have given him a sense of 2 years, or they may have given him a sense of 1 year. And he says, boys, just to make sure. Or maybe it was even less, 6 months. He said, well, let's just take care of all this. Let's just make sure there's no problems. We don't know. But that's how this went. So it says that they came from the east. So here's Judah. Now, you can always find the city of Jerusalem. You find the top of the Dead Sea and go west. And you just go west into the mountains. You don't go down to the valley or to the coastal plain. So you just find top of Jerusalem, Dead Sea, north end of the Dead Sea, go west, and that's where Jerusalem is. And then Bethlehem is 5 to 7 miles south, probably closer to 7 miles from the walled old city of Jerusalem to the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Probably close to 7 miles, depending on the route and stuff you take. But probably as a crow flies, maybe 5. So that's where they are. You notice what this is. That is desert. You are not crossing that desert unless you have to. So when the wise guys came from the east, if that's right, they either came from just right here on the other side in the modern day Jordan, Transjordan. They either came from right here, or they came from over here, but to come, they had to come up this way. What do we call this? The Fertile Crescent. And this region is known as Mesopotamia. What is a hippopotamus? Who said that? Okay, say it again. All right, well, and they were. We actually found Carl, one of your boys, found the hippopotamus ivory ring at el-Hammam. Daniel? Let's pretend like it was. Who was it? Joel? Yes. Okay, Joel did. All right, so yes, hippopotami were known in the Holy Land and Egypt and the area. Break down the word. Hippopotamus. River horse. Which part's river? Which part's horse? Hippo is horse. Potamus is river. Greek. Both of them are Greek. Mesopotamia. What's Potamia? Rivers plural. And meso means middle or between the rivers is what Mesopotamia means. It's the land between the rivers. What rivers? Don't you feel so stinking smart now? Isn't this awesome? So those guys, I think they came from here. There are those that would like to suggest they would just cross the river, 3-4 day journey, which is okay, but there's just not much of a hint of anything going on over here that would lead to those kind of people showing up into Jerusalem. So it doesn't seem to be right, although that could be, if you had some good reasons, I could probably get convinced. But they're clearly from the east. I think they're probably from here, and they would have had to come up around this way, and that would have been a long journey. So they may well have taken a year. I mean, who knows? It could have been something like it, even longer. And of course, when they actually, two different words, Greek words, when they got the one word for Jesus in the manger, and they got the other word when they show up and see Jesus in the house. And it's different words. And I think we're talking about different terminology for different time periods in Jesus' life. So this is the region. I think they probably came from Babylon. That's standard. That's most everybody's view. And they came up over this way and down in, but still coming from the east. So let me just do I'm not done with this, but we're going to finish this part. So shepherds and wise men. Here's what I'd like to suggest. The shepherds versus the wise men. The Jews who were the shepherd, I think they were Jewish shepherds, probably local boys from Bethlehem. I think that probably makes the best sense as to who was in those fields in the summertime. I think that probably fits the story. As opposed to the wise men who were Gentiles from the east, not from the west, like Tyre and like Egypt, Ethiopia, but from the east. I suggested the shepherds were probably hired hands. The wise men were respected, educated, holy men. I forgot to say holy men. Some have suggested they might even have had some priestly responsibilities. Man, once you're at the level that these guys are in society, they would be considered, if they said something, it was probably going to be right. And so they probably had holy, priestly privileges, if not responsibilities. The shepherds were unlikely guests, not because they were dirty, smelly abominations, but just because they were the young guys who couldn't find any other work, and so you hired them to stay out in the field all night to watch your sheep. So they weren't bad people, just the least likely that you would think would ever be invited. While the wise men were also unlikely guests, not because you would never invite them, well, you'd never think to invite them. Who would invite them to this birth in little Bethlehem? Nobody. But I guess God invited them, didn't he? So then the shepherds were specifically invited, and I did suggest that the wise men had a kind of a special invitation in the sky. The angels invited the shepherds, and I'm going to suggest the star in the Old Testament text, and that's where we're going next, invited the shepherds, the wise men. And the angels told the shepherds, it's Christ the Lord. The wise men were looking for King of the Jews, and we saw Herod understood and put the two together. Okay, so here we go. We're going back to the Old Testament. You all right with that? Okay, we got the Israelites on the plains of Moab, and they meet Balaam, the son of Beor. Do you know Balaam, the son of Beor? Who that?
The donkey beater.
Yeah, the donkey hater. Yeah, that's right. Donkey hater. Him and his dumb donkey. That's sort of the story. Well, he arrives. He was invited. You remember who invited him? Who invited Balaam to the Holy Land? King Balak of Moab invited him. In fact, he sent guys 3 times, and Balaam didn't go at God's direction. And finally, God let him go, but it really wasn't really what he should have done, supposed to have done. But God let him go. You ever had God do that for you? He lets you do stupid stuff, and then teaches you from it. You know, well, I get that all the time. So I got that. So it works for me. So he winds up there on the east side of the Jordan River, and we'll look at a map in just a minute. But he winds up in the area. He's up in the mountains while the Israelites are camped in the valley below at Tal al-Hammam, where Carl and I dig. The Israelites are down there, and Balak and Balaam are up in the mountains right there above us. Carl, did you ever spend time sitting there? Because I knew you always work so hard that you didn't have time to sit there and think, but did you ever sit there and just look up in those mountains and think Balaam and Balak up there? You know, it was really moving to me to think, I'm right here. This is where the Bible says it all happened, and they were right up there somewhere, and they went from 4 different places. So that's where the Israelites are, and then they're going to meet Balaam, who is brought to be there by Balak, king of Moab, to curse the Israelites. Balak, king of Moab, knew he could not beat him after what he'd heard and seen. He was scared. So the best thing he could do is not hire mercenaries. He couldn't even find any mercenaries who could take him on. He didn't think. So he decides to hire a prophet. He's not called a prophet in the text here. In the New Testament, he's referred to that way. He's a diviner, a guy who does some hocus pocus, not in the sense of sleight of hand, but he's does religious rituals, like he'll take a cow liver and watch how the liver quivers and tell you something out of that. Or watch a flock of birds fly over and say, ooh, that means something. And then have to make up whatever that was. I'm sure they had a script, and I don't mean that they had a thing. They had a stick, I don't know. Anyway, so that's what he was invited to do. So now here's where we're talking about. So there's the Dead Sea. Remember the top of the Dead Sea go west. Here's where Jerusalem is in the mountains. Here's the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. This whole thing is often called the Rift Valley. It's the northern extension of the great African Rift Valley, where they've got the Arabian Plate. Do they call it the European Plate? I've lost it now. Is it European? Anyway, this is where these 2 plates shift, and that's why it's such an incredible earthquake zone. The Jordan River, the Dead Sea, right up through the Sea of Galilee, right up into the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. It's part of the northern extension of the great Rift Valley that starts in Africa. So this area is the plain, and on this side it's the plain of Moab. On this side it's the plain of Jericho. And so this is the plain right here. This is where the Israelites are camped out. Tal al-Hammam is like right there. If I'd hold it still. That's as steady as I can make it. That's sad, isn't it? Man. Okay. And up in the mountains is where Balak and Balaam are wandering from place to place, because every time Balak says curse him, and he goes into his deal to curse him, he doesn't curse him, he blesses him. And it just ticks Balak off to no end. And so we go through this 4 times. First off, he sent guys 3 times to get him, and he wouldn't come. And finally he does come, and he tells them to curse him 4 times, and they won't curse him at all. And in fact, by the end of his 4th curse, the curse is on Moab. We're going to see it. All right, so the other thing I want you to know, so this is where the Israelites are. This is where Balaam and Balak are. And right up here, right in this area right here, is a historical site that is only famous for one thing. And we'll see this in a minute. It's not on the map, by the way. It's not one of those on the map. Well, some suggest one of it might be, but we don't know for sure. All right, so the Israelites are on the plain of Moab, and they meet Balaam, the son of Beor. And look where Balaam's come from. He is Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is by the Euphrates River. Well, that was way up the Euphrates River, way up north, all the way down to the Persian Gulf. We looked at it on that one map. We're going to look at it again in a minute. So somewhere along the Euphrates River. Then it says, Balak, he said himself, Balaam did, Balak, the king of Moab, brought me from Aram. Now Aram is we would call that today, we would call it Syria. Aram is Syria. That's the Bible word is Aram. We use the word Syria. Aramaic is sometimes called Syriac. So Aram is Syria. So when the map's coming back in just a minute, that's up here on the Tigris and Euphrates, not down here by the Persian Gulf. He's along the Euphrates River, but up north. And then to clarify it, Deuteronomy 23 says, Balaam son of Beor of Pethor in Aram Naharaim. Now, Aram, Syria, Nahar is the Hebrew word for river. Yeah, there you are. I didn't see. I didn't know where you went. Our Jewish teacher, river, Naharim, like a cherubim or seraphim. It's plural. So it's Syria on the rivers. What rivers? Tigris and Euphrates. Naharim is just like Mesopotamia. Same means the same thing, just a different language. And so Balaam was up north in that Syria between the rivers, that area, not down here where I'm suggesting the wise guys came from. Okay? But they're both, I'm suggesting they're both from the Mesopotamia world. Balaam from the North Mesopotamia world, the wise men, well, it says from the east, so I'm putting them down there by Babylon, down south. Could have been up north too, really, could have been. East enough, I suppose. So there's our map. So Jerusalem's down here. There's Tel al-Hammam, Shittim. There's Balak and Moab, Balak and Balaam. Up here is the area where Balaam would have been from, based on the Bible text, on the Euphrates, not up in here, but on the Euphrates in this area here. And I'm suggesting the wise men probably came from the east, but it could have been up farther. It could have been up there even. So I'm making the case that they're both Mesopotamian world people. The wise men of Jesus' day and Balaam of Moses' day. So here's a look. This picture was taken. Some of you been there or mentioned it to me earlier. Khirbet el-Maqatir, where Bryant Wood and I started the excavation for what was the Joshua of Ai. Later, Scott Stripling took that dig over and finished it, and then I moved on with Scott to Shiloh. So this picture was taken from the top of this, from the site of the city of Ai. Bethel and Ai is where Abraham was. It's where Joshua was, and so Jacob was in that area too. That's where the name Bethel came from. And so we're looking over the Jordan River Valley, the north, and the Dead Sea is just right here, just above it. This is a big open area. Khirbet el-Maqatir, Tal al-Hammam. Let's see, I have to work through this. It's on this side of this thing. So it's over right in here. And then these are this is the plateau. This is not where Balak and Balaam would have been. It would have been on the lower hills down in here, and I'll get you a picture in a minute. Down in here, lower hills is where there would have been lower hills that include Mount Nebo and Mount Pisgah. Now this is Mike Ludini's photo. He didn't spell Pisgah right, but I couldn't change it, so I just kept the picture. This is Mount Nebo, and he's suggesting that one of the theories is Pisgah is there. It's one of the heights of this Nebo range. And of course, Mount Nebo is famous to us for, that's where God took Mo. Mo could not go to the Holy Land because he messed up. You know what? I think it's so important. So many people are on the journey to not to go to heaven, but to a productive spiritual daily walk, meaningful relationship with God. And they short circuit the deal. They die before their time, and they never die, and they die never fulfilling what their destiny was, or what their interest and desire and sense of calling was, because of bad choices. Still go to heaven, still be at the pearly gates. Oh, that's good, but I just never got around to down here what I coulda, shoulda done, and that was Mo. All right, he had the chance. And he did all right. He did some good stuff. In fact, in the book of Revelation, they're singing the song of Moses and of the Lamb in heaven. So he did all right. But he could have done so much more. I don't really want to be that guy. I'd like to go ahead and like that guy in the U.S. soccer team who scored the goal and got him into the knockout round, hurt himself in the process. By the way, what happened today? Well, at least never mind. Some of you know what I was thinking. So this is Mount Nebo and Mount Pisgah, and so they would have been in these low. You say, well, it's the highest there is, but behind it gets higher. But this is all you can see from the front. This is the area they would have been when they were cursing the Israelites down here. And Carl, can you remember this? This photo is taken right from Tel el-Hammam. I mean, we know this road and we know this very well. This is taken at the top of Tel el-Hammam, looking east. So Balaam gives 4 oracles, and they are listed. And the 4th one is at the bottom. That's the one we want to look at. He uttered this oracle. The oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of one whose eyes sees clearly. So he's saying, look, I know what I'm talking about here. Now, whether he did or not, that's what he said. The oracle of one who hears the words of God, who has knowledge from the Most High, and who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls prostrate, and whose eyes are opened. I've got things on my mind, I see him, he says, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. Ooh. Does that remind you of something we read a little earlier? What were the wise guys looking for? They were looking for someone born king of the Jews. What's a symbol of a king? A scepter. And what did they say? Pointed them out to the king, pointed them to the king of the Jews? A star. And the Jews would be the Israelites and Jacob, the sons of Jacob. I think the wise men saw this particular star, whatever that was, and I don't know, we don't know, we just don't know. But whatever it was, they saw that and they related it to the prophecy of Balaam about the coming of Jesus. I think this, now, people say, Daniel, I don't doubt that Daniel had influence in the East. I don't doubt that for a minute. But I think there's specific connection of a king, scepter, and a star, and Israel and Judah, Israel and Jacob. They put that all together, and whatever it was they saw, they said, we got to go west, and we got to go to Jerusalem because something's happened. And I think it's because of this prophecy. My suggestion. Now, here's how we're going to end it. This is Paul Harvey used to say, it's the rest of the story. This is Tel Dir Allah. Carl, you remember being there? We used to go there and climb the fence and pick up pieces of pottery, broken pieces of pottery. That's what we do. And so on our days off, we go somewhere else and pick up broken pieces of pottery rather than at our site. So this is the top of the tell. It's about 200 meters long. It's about 30 meters high. This is the top. Whoops. This is the top. I don't know, 4 acres, maybe 5. At the top, probably 2.5, and then all the way around the bottom. And then this is what it looked like from the side. Pretty formidable hill. And on the very top, they excavated a really interesting structure. That's, what's that material? That is mud brick. These are large bricks, way bigger than our bricks. This is the way they did them in the ancient world. These are mud bricks. This level is dated to the 8th century. It's the time of the end of the king of the Israelite northern kingdom. The southern kingdom is still going, but Israelite northern kingdom is ending. So these are mud bricks, and they were covered with plaster. Now, on the left is the plan that the archaeologists found. There was a pit of whitish plaster with writing on it. And there were some other pieces that were found here. And the archaeologists felt like, even though they were found over here in this pit, they felt like this was the area of the wall where this plaster that was written on was, and they've suggested it looks something like this. So there's the pit inside that room. Here's another pile. This is combination number 2. Sorry that cut off there. And this is the fragments of combination number 1. So this is I told you this is up higher, a little farther north. I said I'm going to show you a site in a minute, up there by the Jabbok River, just north of the Jabbok River. This is that site. It's in the tribe of Reuben, on the east side of the Jordan River, in the 8th century. The fragments were found and organized by archaeologists into 4 sections. Only this section really panned out to make sense. They have rearranged them dozens of times. Different scholars are trying to understand what it says. But here's what we know that it says. Well, a couple more slides. This is a close-up of that main section. On the left is the actual stuff. See the red writing? And then there's this red border, a red border up there. This is what it looks like to those who were studying the material. And there's that same thing, but on the right. The name Balaam, son of Beor, is mentioned 3 times in this part. And it's mentioned twice more in those other fragmentary pieces. Okay, now let's think about this a minute. There's this prophet in Aram Naharaim, way up north, who's called to curse the Israelites way down here. And it was a big failure as far as King Balak was concerned. I'm suggesting that prophet's words in the Bible were used to get the wise men from around Babylon to the Holy Land. This prophet's works were so well known that in the 8th century, they were actually written on walls in a building in the Holy Land on the east side of the river. And by the way, this room was there's no indication it was a religious room. It was a manufacturing and distribution center. Now, we don't know for what, although there was some metalworking in the general area, but we just don't know what. I'm suggesting that Balaam, the son of Beor, was a really famous dude, and that he was known and respected everywhere, and that the wise guys somewhere in Mesopotamia, maybe Babylon itself, knew of his writings, and whatever it was triggered when they saw that star, whatever it was, it triggered in their minds that prophecy, and it sent them to Jerusalem and got a whole bunch of stuff going. I've made my case there. So let me just finish with this. After the wise guys left, an angel told Joseph, pack up and you got to go. You're heading to Egypt and you need to go now. Because God knew what? Herod was coming with his boys. He didn't come, of course, but sent his boys. So they got Jesus out of town, and they went to Egypt for some period of time. There we are. I don't know that baby Jesus got to see the pyramids, but that was the part. They would have been in northern Egypt. They might not have gotten all the way over to where the modern area of modern Cairo. They may have stayed in the eastern delta. We don't know, but they went. How do you suppose they could afford this trip? Yeah. God hooked them up before they ever knew they needed hooking up. You ever done that for you? You experienced some of that? It's really cool. I didn't see it coming, either what he did to prepare me or what was going to happen, but he did. And it was all right. I lived through it. Sometimes it was funner than others. I don't think this trip was fun, even if they had a bunch of gold. I'm sure it wasn't that much fun. But God had prepared them and provided for what they needed. So I just got 2 lessons from this. God uses the most unlikely people to do the most extraordinary things. The Wisemen were never expected, although they were pretty special, I guess, in one sense. But the shepherds were just really nobody special. All the special people within 7 miles of Bethlehem he could have invited that night to see baby Jesus, those are the only dudes he invited. I guess he invited the wise guys, but it took him a while to get there. But they invited them. God uses the most ordinary people to do the most extraordinary things. And just for the record, I feel like I'm in that group. I've been so blessed, and I just ain't all that. And it's awesome. And then the second thing, God always does what he says. When he told the shepherds, here's what you're going to see. When they got there, it was exactly what God says. And God always provides what we need when we need it. There's a spiritual concept that I used to teach the guys at Helping Up Mission, and it's the definition of contentment. It's not a biblical definition, but to me it screams biblical truth. Contentment is realizing that God has already provided everything necessary for my present well-being. He's already provided everything necessary for my present well-being. That means if I don't have it now, I don't need it now. Because he'd already made sure I had what I needed when I needed it. I think I want it. I think I deserve it. He's already provided everything necessary for my present well-being. And if I think that way, this is the definition of what? Contentment. Think about it. If I really believed he's already provided everything necessary for my present well-being, would I be content? Absolutely. So what's my problem? Well, I can work at this a little bit, This is the way it ought to be. Okay, I want to finish with this. I don't believe archaeology proves the Bible. I believe it helps us to trust the Bible. And it helps us trust the Bible for the past, for history. Now, if archaeology can help us trust the Bible for the past, for history, it can also help us trust for the future, for eternity. Right? We use archaeology as a tool to help people trust the Bible so they can be willing to trust the Bible for the past, so you can trust the Bible for the future. But I tell you where I'm really hung up on, it's the third one. If we trust the Bible for the past and we trust the Bible for the future, what we really need to learn to do is trust the Bible for the present, one day at a time. We're a bunch of people, I'm sure most of us, we've seen and read enough, we've experienced enough, we trust the Bible for the past, or maybe the past. And then we've also come to where we trust the Bible for the future. But sometimes we so struggle with right here, right now. And that's the crux of the matter. That's where we really got to get to. I'm happy for you for the past. I'm happy about you for the future. But let's get it together for right here, right now. Thank you, guys. This has been my joy to share with you what matters to me. Okay, now Pastor Carl said that when I get done, I should say, you are officially dismissed. And you are, but if you would like to stay and ask questions, and we can do it as a group, but some of you need to go, it's time. Or if you want to run over, people could run to the museum right now, couldn't they, Carl? All right, if you really want to go to the museum, just see him on the back, and he'll open it up for you. But otherwise, you're welcome to just leave or stand out there and talk. But if you'd like to stay and you have questions, or you want to hear what the other questions are, you're welcome to stay. But we've kept you for quite a while. It's been my privilege to be here with you, and I'd love to respond to other questions and comments, and Carl too. And then also when, the museum's open, and while Carl said, you might know some stuff I don't know, I doubt it. He knows this stuff, but I'll be glad to be over there. But we're glad, so I'm going to say, hasta la vista, baby. All right? We're done. You can get up and go, but the rest, if you don't want to go, stay and we'll talk, and I'll take the first question now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was just wondering why the angels had to appear to the shepherds in those specific fields. Why couldn't the angels appear to the shepherds when they were out in the desert?
Yeah, so why did the angel have to appear to the shepherds in those fields at that time? I think it was simply a matter of when it happened, that's where they were, and it's just telling us the time of the year, that's all. I think it's just a hint in the Bible at the time of the year, I think. That the birth of Jesus wasn't in December. That wouldn't matter to anybody except, now that we got our deal. But in the old days, it wouldn't have mattered to anybody. Just, when was it? Well, based on this, we think it was probably that time. So that's why. All right? And goodbye, you folks. Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you. Thank you so much. Now, anybody else? Question? Yes?
Were there kings in Mesopotamia at the time that might have sent the Magi as emissaries?
Let's see. Kings in Mesopotamia, and right at the end, right in between the end of the BC and beginning of AD, there would have been. This would have been the Alexander the Great's empire had disintegrated. He controlled Babylon. It disintegrated. His generals divided up the region. Seleucus had that region, but I'm not sure he went all the way to Babylon. There would have been others at that time, and I cannot remember that part of the world. But yes, there would have been kings. They could have sent them, and maybe these guys couldn't go without permission anyway. We don't know. So that's a good thought. These guys, you're not a freelance wise guy, You don't just wander around telling them I'm a wise guy, You're hooked up somewhere with somebody. That gives you your juice because you're working for so and so. So they probably had to have permission. Seemingly, or they said, we got to go. I don't know, but that's a thought. I don't know who to put in Babylon at that time or that region.
I was thinking like if people think literally as kings and a political sort of, there's going to be a new king, there's going to be a power shift, and didn't they send like frankincense? I can't remember if it's myrrh or frankincense. One is for the priest and one is for the king, right?
Though myrrh was used in burials and death, frankincense was typically used in worship to God. So frankincense, they've been suggested, myrrh represents his humanity and death, frankincense represents his deity, and gold his royalty. That's sort of the standard thing. I think it's probably, has some merit, but I don't know. I don't think we should make too much of it. Yeah, yes, ma'am. I don't know. I would imagine. What do you think about it? What kind of worship would the Magi have been thinking about or doing? What are we going to do when we are in heaven in front of Jesus? We're going to bow, and we'll bow ourselves in whatever crowns or whatever stuff we got. We'll throw it at his feet because we know anything that we pulled off or have or earned or whatever, it's all due to him. So I imagine they bowed. That's what we said. They bowed to him, and then they presented him these gifts. So I would think that was probably, who knows what else ever said it happened, but that was the ultimate display of humility on their part and honor to him. That's what I would say. Yes, sir.
Are there any ideas of the kind of star that the Wisemen?
We just do not have historical. It's amazing. There are a lot of historical records for celestial events, but we just don't have anything. We know Herod died in 4 BC. That's a well-established historical fact. We don't really have any doubts about that. We know there was a special event in 6 AD. Just doesn't fit our timeline at all. We just don't have it. And we have the same problem with the census from Caesar Augustus when Quirinius was the ruler at least an official in Syria. Thank you. We just don't know. And that kind of stuff used to really bother me, but we just don't know. Now, we could get the information. Now, if you want to make that your PhD dissertation, you can do that and see what you come up with. But this has been searched and stuff. We just don't know. Are you okay? Can you get comfortable with not knowing everything that God's doing? My brother-in-law, probably shouldn't have said that. I know this guy. His wife was unfaithful, and he followed her. So we know what was going on. It ate him alive. He said to me, "I'm sorry, I know what I know." Now, for the record, she was an alcoholic. She got clean. Years later, they divorced and moved on. But she got clean years later, and she's doing great today in the Lord. But she really got off. And he said, "I'm sorry that I did that." Look, there's times, I think the prophet Isaiah said it. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. That wasn't Isaiah. We need to get comfortable with just letting go sometimes. Just let it go. We need to be able to do that. So why we don't know, I'd love to know, and I'm willing to listen to anybody's ideas, but the best minds around on the subject have not been able to figure it out yet. So I'm just kind of waiting till we get some more information, and we might.
The DVD of the Star of Bethlehem?
Which one? Who is it?
Larson, a researcher, put it together in 2007 called the Star of Bethlehem.
I'm aware of it, but I have not seen it. Well, I'll have to take a look. So and it could be like a thing, kind of like our dig at Tel al-Hammam, as suggesting it's Sodom. It's not accepted by a lot of people, but we think there's really strong evidence that that's what it is. So that could be the same kind of thing. It's just not out there yet. Was there another hand that I see?
Why not an angel? Maybe the star was just an angel guiding.
And theologically, we made the connection between stars and angels frequently in the Bible, all the way to the book of Revelation. The angel of the church of, holding 7 stars. And so it could very well have something to do where it wasn't celestial in the sense of it was supernatural instead of celestial. That's very possible. And at this point, that is as good as any other answer. And it could be. It really could be. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, something God poofed into existence for a particular reason.
So just to clarify the birth of Christ using the archaeological information that he provided, are we saying it's rained after March and before October?
Yes. Based on what we know about the agricultural calendar, what we understand about the way Bethlehem was laid out and its deal, and so you got to kind of think agriculturally and economically. You know that's what would have to happen. If they're going to be in those fields, it can't be during the harvest, because guys, I'm just not going to let you in my fields, man. I'm going to hurt you, and I'll eat your sheep. So and have a nice wool coat for next winter. So it's a reasonable answer. I don't think we can prove it. We can't prove it, but it's a reasonable answer. I think it's the most reasonable, and I didn't come up with it. It's the most reasonable I've heard.
Yeah, kind of in that range. I heard an argument or case that, I don't know if you know who Jonathan Kahn is, about the timing. And he said the reason that the shepherds were in the field is because it was a time of birthing for the sheep. The lambs were being birthed at that point in time. So they're in the sheep and tending to them during that process. He made the case that that typically happens around April.
Yeah.
So he was making a case that Jesus was born as the Lamb of God. At the same time, the lambs were born in Bethlehem, which is a location that the sheep were often taken from to go to be used for the sacrifice.
And I think that's
Born at that time. So he was making a case for them typically around Passover.
for me, the case of the birthing of lambs at that time of year, that speaks to me loudly. The symbolism I'm okay with, but I don't get, as an archaeologist, I don't get too hung up with that, but it's not invaluable, but that's just not something I get really excited about. But I think that's a very decent argument, and it would fit into this frame. It would tighten it up a little bit, but it would fit in this basic time frame. So that's a nice thought. Okay, you get to go first.
So with the word manger, what we typically think of, what would you say would be a better translation, since the description, and I missed your first talk, but just from kind of hearing people say, what would be a better translation for that word, based off of what you're saying?
Well, and let me, I actually want to say this a couple times, and I kept forgetting. Do any of you use Bible Gateway online? It's a great tool, and they have a translation on there called the Net Bible. Net is New English Translation. It's the most recent, not the most modern. It's the most recent English translation, finished about 2015 or something. And I started reading it back early 2000s, and their text was good, their translation was good, but it was their notes, copious notes, that were so helpful. They dealt with geography and history and language, Greek or Hebrew. They dealt with the text in Septuagint versus Masoretic and the different Greek texts. It's fabulous, and it is now my Bible of choice online. The NET, Net Bible, New English Translation, and I read it all the time. It is my personal devotional Bible, and you just get it on Bible Gateway. I just love it, and I'm kind of an apostle for it right now. And so I would say, if you're interested, give it a try. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine, but you might really love it too. Now, so in the Net Bible, every time they have the word manger, they do a note and said feeding trough. So, where I come from, a feeding trough is a manger. That works for me very well. So archaeologically, what we call a feeding trough could be just a bin, a storage bin. It didn't have to be a feeding trough. So, admittedly, so I think whatever works, like I don't know what it's like here in California, but and I don't know Stockton. I don't know if they got feeding troughs and mangers over there, or understand them very well. So come up with terms that work. But a manger, a feeding trough, a crib, although that have different terminology too. So, but that might work. Those would be the three words that come to my mind when I think of what we're talking about.
That would imply that he was, some people may take that to mean that he was with animals, right?
Well, he was in my opinion, he was in the stable area of the house. The guest room was up top, and that was empty, that was full, and I'm guessing Mary. We just don't know, and I love to just be able to speculate. here's what the Bible says, and I look at it and I read it and I go, you know, I think that what makes sense is, and I get some other people and I say, yeah, that makes sense to me. So I have no problem speculating, just say so. Well, but it's my idea that maybe, and if you do it that way, people can listen to what you're saying. We act like it's the facts, and then they tune us out. So I think it's reasonable that in the very same house that on the ground floor she gave birth and laid him in the manger, feeding trough crib, that the upstairs room was the guest room that was full, and Mary says, I'm not climbing that ladder. Or whether it's stairs, I know, I don't want to go. Joe, I am not moving another step. Right here, clean that area out, I'm hanging. Okay, that would be, for me, that's how I would understand it. Yes?
Gary, would you be willing to share the agricultural cycle?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so let me, so I have Logos Bible software, and I got it off of there. Now I'm not sure. What I would say is you shouldn't. You know, this would be for study. I got no problem with that at all. It's in here somewhere. There it is. All right. So, and is the light okay? So, yeah. So don't put it online anywhere, anything, or don't put it in your next publication. But for personal study and teaching, I think this is appropriate. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Comment, thank you for making it so clear in your lectures and also your application for daily life. That's really been helpful.
If really, truly, I'm just so weary of our theological correctness, and we're so focused on that, we miss the essence of the book. And this book changed my life. That's what it was designed to do. And there were points I got a little too focused on theology and doctrine. And I'm not saying doctrine's bad, but man, this book's supposed to change us. And this kind of study for me, Bible, history, and archaeology, is transformational for me. So thank you.
Do you, tell me your understanding of Balaam. Do you view him overall as would you consider the New Testament as a false prophet that maybe God used to prophesy something true? Or what's your take?
You know, when you read him up to this point in the story, he seems like a pretty good guy. I mean, he's screwed up really bad, with the donkey and all that stuff, and he really had the issues. But in the end of Numbers, he encourages the Moabite women to go into the Israelite camp to take them out, and that caused his death and the death of a whole bunch of Israelites and Midianites and everybody. So I think the New Testament's treatment of him is appropriate. He was a guy with potentially so much potential, never measured up to me. That would be, you asked my opinion, that's how I see him. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I missed the point you made, and I'm okay if I did. But if Mary and Joseph came to Bethlehem to do that census thing, don't we know when that was, so we can correlate the birth date with that?
Right, we do not. We do not have that census. It's just not clear. There are some censuses around, but it's just nothing like this, the empire, the whole Roman Empire. And such a census would have been commissioned by the Senate in Rome. It ought to be a big deal. We ought to have a record. Now, I'm sure the Bible's right, but maybe we've misunderstood some things about what the Bible text says, and we find something, we go, oh, you know what, this makes sense. But right now, we don't have what that is. Okay, if you're done as a group, I'd be glad to talk to you privately, whatever. If you want to go to the museum, I think I'll go over there with my wife and Carl and just look around a little bit more. But if you'd like to go. If you want to talk privately with me first or whatever, I'm glad to do that. Thanks for being with me. It's just been a really cool deal for me. Thank you so much.